This episode contains material that may be triggering to some individuals. Please check the show notes for more information and be mindful of your own mental health and comfort levels. Parenting is such a mix of joy and challenge, and sometimes we need a little extra support along the way. That's why I wanted to share Doa Health with you. It's an app and website that connects you with expert coaches, workshops, and reliable resources for mental health, relationships, and parenting. Everything is created and reviewed by licensed professionals, so you can trust the guidance you're getting. You'll even find Quiet Connection episodes featured inside Doa, so our conversations can support you there, too. And if you're part of our community, you'll get 10% off with the code QUIET10 when you sign up. Just remember, all uppercase and the number 10. Visit doahealth.com or download the app today. Support is just a tap away. Welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. Today I'm joined by Willemijn, a researcher, advocate, and mother of two, whose story highlights both the reality of postpartum psychosis and the incredible resilience that can follow. Willemijn shares her experiences of hospitalization, recovery, and relapse, and how she built a strong support system to make her second birth a healing one. Her journey is both deeply personal and profoundly important, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Here's Willemijn. Hello! Today I am joined by Willemijn. Hello, Willemijn. How are you?
Hi, Chelsea. I'm good. How are you?
I'm so good. This has been such a long time coming, listeners. We connected such a long time ago, and because you are a world traveler, fate has just kind of bounced us around, but we're here and I'm excited, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today. Rather than me go down the list of all the things I admire about you, I would love it if you could introduce yourself to listeners and let us know who you were before becoming a parent.
Absolutely. So my name is Willemijn. Like you said, a bit of a world traveler. I am from the Netherlands, born and raised, and I did stick around until my 25th birthday or so. But then the traveling began, and I lived in New Zealand with my partner, then moved to the UK, which is where I had my firstborn son, and I'm sure we'll dive into that later. And after that, actually, we had a very exciting and tropical chapter where we lived in Sri Lanka for 2 years. And very recently moved to South Africa. So we've landed this side and happy to be here. My partner is South African, and so are my two kids, actually. And yeah, who was I before becoming a mother? I still like to think I am that person, or I definitely found that person back, which is something that really makes me happy. And I am a sporty, outgoing, social kind of extrovert person. In terms of work, I've got a background in international public health, studied public health very much with the dream to start working in international development. So what I do for a living is I think along with NGOs about how they implement projects and how they can evaluate, assess them, and how they can strategically do that differently sometimes to make even more impact. So a lot of that. And I feel like my background actually is also in a wicked way connected to my experience suffering maternal mental health issues. So those two have now come together into what I do for work and what I do from a very deep passion that I have.
Yeah, and that is something that is very evident, and we'll talk about this later on in the episode, but if you follow Willemijn on Instagram or any social media, like your advocacy and your passion is so evident, and that's something that definitely drew me to you. But yeah, let's let's get into it a little bit. I love that you said that you're finding that person again and you feel like you are that person again, which is really important. So you met your partner, you were at the time living in the UK, and you decided baby time. How did that initially go for you? How was pregnancy and the experience before birth?
Yeah. Actually, I met my partner way before the UK. We actually did all the traveling that I said we did together. Him and I, we met in the Netherlands, and then jointly we went to New Zealand. And actually, the move to the UK was slightly related to us starting to think about babies. We were actually loving life in New Zealand, but for me personally, I felt like I was so far removed, literally on the other side of the world from family and friends. I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to do something significant as parenthood all the way on the other side of the world, being far removed from people very close to me. So the decision to move to the UK was partly because of career development, but definitely also my desire to be closer to family and friends in the Netherlands. The reason we landed on the UK was from my partner's job perspective. And I thought at the time, oh, that's nice and fairly close to home. Um, which it is until the pandemic hits.
Mhm.
But yeah, we were talking about babies, but we were one of those couples that were blessed with literally trying for about a week, and then
Yeah.
it happened. So it was actually quite strange because we had spoken about it, and I moved to England before he did. We were half a year apart, so I already went off birth control, and my body could kind of get ready for it. And then he literally arrived the week that all international airports were shutting. But for some sort of miracle, he pushed and he got stuck a little bit on his journey for a week in Auckland. But then eventually he did make it on one of the very few last international airplanes. And he walked through total empty airports and arrived in the UK. Yeah, I guess hindsight, you never know. But I think it was basically when we said hello again that I felt pregnant. So we never really had to try or anything. And with that, my firstborn son is also the definition of a COVID baby because he was conceived March 2020 and we had him in the first week of January 2021. So pretty much when the world was totally on hold.
Yeah, and that's with a lot of my guests who were pregnant during COVID, it's such a different experience and such a unique experience because we talk about like isolation in general in terms of pregnancy and postpartum, but we were all isolated. Like you were truly isolated through your pregnancy. Were you enjoying that? Were you enjoying having that time with you and your partner through your pregnancy?
Actually, we did have a really great time because we were house sitting, very beautiful big house with a big garden. So I didn't feel like locked down in that sense. We had a lovely outdoor space, and in the UK you're also allowed to go for one outing a day. So we did actually have this lovely kind of little bubble, and I think we really got excited by the pregnancy, and we got to enjoy the fact that this was coming our way. And I also didn't have some of these pregnancy niggles or things that you have to deal with. Like, I never had to hide in the beginning that I was not drinking alcohol because there was no socializing. So this kind of like my best friend drank my champagne sneakily while we were at the party kind of vibe, I never had. But also I could really take it, like I could take it easy and rest and listen to my body. Working from home, especially in the late stage of your pregnancy, is actually quite nice because you know you can sit on the sofa when you're uncomfortable. So I think a lot of these, yeah, I didn't really feel that isolated during pregnancy. The only thing is that I started missing a few of the things that are also parts of me that I enjoy. Like I didn't get to do pregnancy yoga, for example, which is totally something that I would have done if it wasn't for COVID. And I do feel hindsight that my whole period of pregnancy was like nice, but I do, in hindsight now reflecting on what happened postpartum, I think like there were maybe parts of my normal life that I was missing. Like I'm a social person, I'm a sporty person, like I said, and there was none of that. So maybe hindsight, it did have an effect. But at the time, it felt like we were in this lovely bubble. The only
Yeah.
thing is we were also moving, and that was a bit stressful. The last
That's
few months
stressful
or
in
last
every
trimester.
pregnancy.
Yes, moving, and I don't know what it is, but a lot of people tend to do it, and I guess it has to do with having to upgrade to more space. But yeah, we were definitely that couple that was scrambling, doing renovations in third trimester, which was a bit of a challenge. And that's maybe when my stress level started rising. But the first and second trimester were lovely when we were still house sitting in that beautiful house over summer, by the way, which was a lovely summer in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And I ask that to sort of get a background because obviously I know the direction that your story took, but listeners don't. So we're gonna it's gonna feel like we're breezing through some things, but skipping ahead to first of all, giving birth during a pandemic. I'm not sure what it was like in the UK. Um, but why don't you tell me? What was that like? What was it like over there?
Um, Yeah, of course, this is hard because I don't know what it was like in the USA, but I guess like it was the typical things that were experienced worldwide. Like definitely healthcare was stretched. Healthcare stuff was by then, because the pandemic had been going on for like 9 or 10 months, they're definitely burned out. So you could sense that kind of level of um stress within the health system, and also even a little bit before. I don't think normally you would have as little context points with your midwife as what I had during my pregnancy. So you could feel as a patient doing your normal health trajectory of being pregnant, like they were not quite able to meet the needs that they're probably normally able to meet. And though I did see my midwife a few times, I think I only saw her twice face to face, which is less than what is usual, I
Yeah.
think.
Yes.
I did have contacts online though, and I did have a hospital appointment for the general 20-week check. But yeah, throughout pregnancy, they did what I needed to do, but you could sense from every aspect, and it was also in the news, like the NHS, which is the National Health System in the UK, was under pressure, like many places in the world. And then I went into labor 6 days post my due date, so we were waiting.
Yeah.
I was due to have my baby on the 31st of December, which is also an interesting due date. And he was nice and happy and cozy, so we had to wait a little bit longer. And then I went into labor on the 6th of January and went into hospital. And I have to say, the hospital and the maternity ward that day seemed like fairly normal. There wasn't like utter chaos. I was already in what they thought was true labor when I arrived at hospital. So we had timed that well, and I was allowed into my own room directly, which was a nice birthing suite with a bath. And the only minor detail was that there was a cracked window, and it was -4 that day. So it was a little bit chilly. I I I didn't realize at the time, but when I saw the photos later, my partner, he was wearing a jacket, and I was like, "Why were you wearing your winter coat?" The whole like that doesn't make sense. He was like, "Did you not realize that room was freezing?" So, but yeah, other than that, the room and the space that we were given was great, and I had a nice supportive caretakers around me. But I did have a very long, prolonged, yeah, like 24 plus 7. So yeah, over 30
Yeah.
hours. And that's
Yeah.
long. And I was like what they call this like failure to progress. So I was stuck at 7 centimeter dilation for ages. I did a hypnobirthing course, and I was quite set on not going down the very medicalized route. I had prepared myself for that. I wasn't fully set on like not having any interventions, but I was hoping that I could do it that way. And for a long time, it looked like I was doing well, but then I got stuck at the 7 centimeters for hours and hours and hours. And then your body just starts to get very fatigued. And at a certain stage, the pain wasn't even really taken over that much, but it was more exhaustion. So eventually we decided that I would have an epidural overnight, because they were like, girl, you got to have some energy to push, because
Yeah.
That's the critical part. And I was okay with that. The epidural setting was horrible. Um, I feel I had to come in and do it again. So I had it twice. And I could initially also, when they then come in for those tests, whether you can still feel, I could still feel it. And by then my partner was a bit like, you guys do know that she's very tall, right? I'm 1 meter 81. He's like, you have realized that maybe, he started to worry a bit. And I was like, yeah, I can still feel it. I can still feel it. So then he had to come in and do it again. And by then I was definitely getting a bit like feeling more that sense of being out of control and being more medicalized. But luckily, our son was like in total happy state, no signs of stress. I did get a bit of rest after the epidural, and then in the morning I was finally dilated enough, and I had a assisted delivery. So, what do they call it? An episiotomy, little incision,
Oh, an
and then
episiotomy. Yep.
episiotomy, and then um, he was delivered with forceps. So I felt like at that stage I was like totally out of control, and I didn't quite like this fact that then suddenly an OBGYN walks in, and that lady was quite forceful. She was like, yeah, we're going to do it now. And if you don't do it now, like you're on the clock kind of vibe. And that was really when I started to feel a little bit like, okay, well, guys, it was going quite all right. But if you all start hoovering over me and telling me I'm on the clock and it got to happen now, and otherwise we're going to rush to cesarean, like that I never really reflect on my birth experience as being traumatic, but I think there were a few elements there that were traumatic. It's just not nice when that full autonomy is taken away from you when you're in a process that actually, in my case, I was prepared and I knew what I wanted, and I also still felt like I knew what I was able to do. But there was definitely a bit of that sliding level of the healthcare professionals take over and think they know better, which is not always the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I ask about all that context, and I love all of that context. I do want to note you're not the first person to tell me who has given birth in the UK that it feels like the OBGYNs come in and they're like, okay, we're on the clock. And that's not how birth is supposed to go. Like your body is not on a timer. So that seems to be kind of a common occurrence over there. But all of that backstory where you had this nice pregnancy experience where you were able to take things slow, you felt empowered. You may have missed out on some of the things you would have liked to experience, but overall, it was a pretty smooth pregnancy. Takes us to your postpartum experience, which was very different than what you had envisioned. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So I feel like maybe for the listeners who don't know, like I suffered postpartum psychosis. But like you just summarized quite well, I did have a fairly normal pregnancy. Yes, there was a bit of renovation stress and moving houses, but there was nothing, there were no real signs during my pregnancy that mentally I was struggling. Um, Again, like I just said myself, I didn't have a super smooth first labor, like first delivery of my first child. But then again, most women don't have the first baby, usually takes longer. It's not unusual that there is assisted delivery. Like there was nothing really out of the ordinary. And also besides, I had not ever struggled with my mental health prior to this. So though I had heard about mental health issues, and specifically people tend to know, when they do know anything, they know about postpartum depression. I had not, like, I kind of brushed it off thinking, okay, that might happen, but definitely not to me kind of vibe. And then I suffered postpartum psychosis, which is a little bit the mother of all, let's say, beasts, but not the other word with B, but yeah, it's the mother of all. But
Yeah.
if you think in the maternal mental health complications that you could have postpartum, and it totally took us by surprise. And I do feel like that definitely did start within hospital, because after having the baby, after that, you go to the maternity ward, which, opposite to what I described, there you could sense the stress. Like it was chaos in the hospital. It was a small room with 6 beds, only tiny curtains around it. There were other mothers. it seems like it wasn't just running as smooth. There was a bit of like, I heard a bit of fighting between nurses, like there was tension there, and there was no calm and peace and quiet. And I was discharged from hospital about I had to sleep there for one night, and that first night I didn't get to sleep even though my baby slept. And I feel like that was the beginning, because postpartum psychosis often starts with insomnia. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, it definitely did. And my first night of no sleep after such a long labor was at the maternity ward, and my baby actually slept through
Oh my
quite long.
gosh.
Quite long, like I think like I fed him in the night, like in the evening, and then he slept up until 4 a.m., which is unheard of for a baby.
Wow.
I think he was just exhausted from labor. So I could have, but I could already in that, like that night, I could sense, like I was woken up by other noises. There was a fight between another mom who was having a fight with the nurses, because they were telling her that she had to formula feed, and I think she didn't. And then there was this other lady who was calling with her family in India, and it was such like utter chaos there. And the lights were on. There was like, I felt like there was no any kind of even effort to make a quiet space. So I decided to sleep with my noise cancelers on, but then I was of course worried that I wouldn't hear my own baby. So like this is where kind of like the stress and the uneasiness started. But then the next day I was like, okay, I gotta go home. I don't want to be here another night. So the whole day I kind of pushed and advocated for me ticking all the boxes to be dismissed. So I was like, yeah, who do I need to see? Who do I need to? And doctors kept coming by and nurses kept coming by. And I was like, can I go? Can I go? Can I go? But it was all unorganized and chaotic. And I was just like pushing because I wanted to get out of there. And I did go home that next day. And I just never really got into this kind of calm quiet. I think over the days, I was just in this typical elated, high energy mood. And over the days at home, the first week postpartum, that just deteriorated. And after 3 days, I started to become delusional. I started to have a few like very interesting, wildly creative ideas that in my mind make sense. And my partner started to look a bit like me, like, "Oh, what are you on about?" And then I just didn't sleep, even if the baby would sleep. And it just got worse from there. And it started to also create a lot of pressure between me and him, because he was like, I think later he did recognize that something was off. But the first few days he was just like, what's wrong with you? Like, just, we just had a baby. But yeah, how do you know that that's not normal? Which is one of my big questions also. Like, everyone says, oh, when you have a baby, you don't sleep. Everyone knows that having a
Mm-hmm.
baby is associated with poor sleep. But I was at a certain stage, I was like, but this is not normal. I'm not sleeping whatsoever. No sleep.
Yeah.
I even
W-
texted a friend who also had a baby that week, and I was like, no, I don't think I ever have to sleep again. And she was like, uh, not quite sure about that one. I was like, no, I just listen to meditation podcasts. I will be fine. So that's when I started to like lose it. But how do people pick up on a new mom who's like maybe a bit crazy interacting and doing? And it was only until I had a major kind of panic attack around day 10, which happened to be when the midwife was around. And I think that really saved me. That midwife and my partner were like, nah, something is not right.
yeah.
And
What was that? What was that turning point?
I think over the days, the insomnia started gathering, and I luckily didn't suffer from full-on hallucinations. So maybe for the listeners, the difference between delusions and hallucinations is a good one to clarify. But delusions are like untrue thinking. But hallucinations are when you actually have senses that are not, like you could see or hear or feel something that is not there. I didn't really have hallucinations, but I did have very severe delusional thinking. And it started unfolding. I had figured out in my mind, okay, if I don't sleep, that's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had made the conclusion, well, then, if you're doing something that is not healthy, I might just lose my ability to think rationally, which is still kind of like a normal conclusion. But then I got worried that when I'm very tired, English is my second language. So when I get really tired, I always struggle a little bit with speaking English, which is okay because my partner, he understands Dutch. So then I switched to my mother tongue. But I had then come to the conclusion that I was going to lose my ability to speak. And I also thought that I was fully going to lose I might die from lack of sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
at a certain stage, I really became convinced that I was going to lose my ability to speak. Therefore, I started frantically writing down in a very chaotic, messy kind of notes. Everything I was writing down, there were notes everywhere because I thought, okay, like maybe soon I can't write anymore either. So I was trying to convey messages in that way. And I started to be convinced that if I wouldn't sleep, I might die. So therefore, maybe I should eat and drink more. So I was like going to the fridge all the time,
Wow.
drinking milk, like milk, because I thought like if I don't eat and drink, I will definitely die. And when the midwife was there, I had a panic attack saying, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And obviously that is something that is taken serious.
Yeah.
And she kind of guided me through it out of the panic attack first. But then later when I think they got me calm, and I can't recall everything as well, I think the midwife and my partner, we had a chat, and yeah, I've said this on other podcasts and recordings that I did. I really think he saved my life because without knowing what it was, he was able to be like, she's not all right. And I think a lot of, and we know there's a lot of postpartum psychosis goes undiagnosed for a long time. It lingers, which is when the true tragedy comes in. Women are suffering silently and no one kind of picks it up. And maybe because I was extremely bombastic about it, and the timing was lucky in a way that the midwife was around. It was picked up, but he was definitely able to say like, I don't know what's wrong, but something is wrong with her, and we need to take it seriously. And I was admitted to psychiatric ward, a mother and baby unit, as they call it in the UK, which is a specialized psychiatric ward for mothers and their babies, which is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Which doesn't exist in a lot of other developed
yeah,
nations. It's not we don't have that here, and they don't have them in Canada as far as I know. But
yeah.
they do in the UK. And you get to have baby with you.
Yes, and that's why I paused a bit in my story because it's like obviously I didn't know this at the time. For me it was still extremely traumatic because I had to go I had to get in the car, we had to get baby stuff, and I kind of knew I was extremely confused right then, but my partner, I said like, no, we're going to take you somewhere because you're not okay and they're going to help you. And by then I thought I was going to a sleep hotel because I knew that I had to sleep. So, and then
Yeah.
in the car, I remember we spoke a bit in an analogy, but I said, so I'm going to the sleep hotel. And he was like, yeah, you're going to a sleep hotel. So I was convinced I was going to a sleep hotel, but actually I was going to a psychiatric unit. And I didn't know right then what that was, what that meant. And it was only until way later in my recovery journey that indeed I found out like I was so lucky. There was a mother and baby unit, and yes, they are available in the UK. Still not enough if you look at it from like a needs-based perspective. There are not enough, and also they're not near enough. So you might have to travel very far, which means you're removed from your partner and your family. Sometimes there's at the time that you need it, there's not a bed available. So even in the UK, there is 100% room for improvement. But yes, they do have them, and countries like the US, Canada, and many other Western developed countries don't have them. Some countries do have them, but if you only have one or two in the whole country, then that's not going to really make a difference either. So yeah, I was lucky enough to be admitted to one on the day that I needed it, and the drive from door to door was about 15 minutes. So yes, I was extremely
Wow.
lucky. Yeah.
So we'll touch a little bit on on the recovery process because that'll lead us to our next section. But once you were settled in at the mother baby unit and you finally kind of had a grasp on what you were doing there and why you were there, um, how long did that process take? And how did you feel throughout? How did you feel about being there?
I'm not gonna lie, I found it horrible. So all this kind of positive talk that I have about it now is really because I know that it was needed. But when I was admitted, I remember the moment I walked in, it was quite like dramatic because everything was COVID. So it's daunting to walk onto a psychiatric ward. It's even more daunting to do that when everyone is wearing a little mask and their faces are covered. When you're with your newborn baby, only 10 days postpartum, I felt like I was walking into a ghost house or some sort of prison. I was extremely confused and scared, but I tried to really be brave. And my partner had said to me, you got to be brave, you got to do this. But then I was so confused. I thought that everything that was being said to me had a deeper or a second or reversed kind of meaning. So even something saying like as simple as like my partner had said like you gotta be brave, you gotta listen to them. I thought, okay, maybe he means I should not listen to them, kind of
Mm,
vibe. Like that was my kind of thinking. I was so delusional. So for me to stabilize, which is what they do initially when you come in with such a acute psychiatric conditions as a psychosis, they're first always going to stabilize you on medication, and that process took about a week. So in the beginning I was still not sleeping, I was still delusional, I was still walking around and making notes and creating chaos and moving stuff from left to right in the room. So only once I had kind of settled and slept a bit, and like with the help of medication, and I started to have a little bit of realization like, okay, this is happening to me. That's when I was like, okay, I kind of understand that why I'm here. But then, and this is an interesting personality of mine, I can be extremely determined and I'm a bit competitive. So I was like, okay, I got to get out of here now. So I kind of didn't want to be there. And I really felt like I'm just going to be your A+ student and do everything the way it's supposed to be done so that it can go home ASAP. And I did go home after 3 weeks, which in hindsight I think was too quick. But
mm,
with all the respect for the caretakers there, they were also dealing with COVID. And what they normally do is they send people home for a day, a couple of hours, you come back again. And then maybe later you go for the weekend and you come back again on Monday morning. But the issue with COVID was that then upon return to the ward, you would have to isolate in the room, which is horrible. Like no one wants to be
mhm,
isolated in a room, let alone with a baby in a psychiatric unit. So upon my first trial to go home, I came back and I had to isolate, and the psychiatrist came to assess me, and I kind of like convinced her, nah, like, let's just go home because I'm not going to do this 24-hour isolation thing. And I got to go home after 3 weeks. My parents came over from the Netherlands to help. So I had my mom and dad and my partner by then to help me and the baby, but to be honest, more so me. And I was kind of getting a little bit better, but I had a relapse after 2 months. So basically,
mm.
2.5 months postpartum. We made a decision to change my medication because of side effects, and that really backfired. And I don't really feel that that was anyone's fault or mistake, but it was a big one because I had to go back into the unit. And my second psychosis was actually much more severe. The way I was delusional and confused about things were a lot more scary. I was thinking a lot more about the devil and convinced that my baby was a devil child, which is not something I really like to say out loud, but I did.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was a lot more also convinced, like it was, I don't know, in a weird way, it was a bit of a darker psychosis. And I think I had a little bit of more understanding that it was happening again, so I was fighting it more again as well. So when I was in the unit, I displayed a lot more like not only confused behavior, but also sometimes aggressive behavior. I was like, I don't want to be here. What am I doing here? Like I would get angry a lot and frustrated a lot. And the second admission, which in it was also again about 3-4 weeks, I struggled a lot more with internal demons, and it was a harder one to go through. But recovery in another way was nicer because by then there were quite a few nice people on the ward, some people that I still actually talk to nowadays. And there was a lovely activity coordinator who would take
Hmm.
us on walks and outings, and she was very supportive. I would even do a little workout with her because she was like, "Oh, you want to work out? Okay, we work out." So actually it was, if I think back about it now, like we would play games and a nurse would polish my nails. Like I feel like we took it a bit more slow, and for me that worked because the real recovery trajectory started after that. And it takes long because you actually recover at home. But yeah, it was about, I would say, a year before you're really back to yourself. You're definitely, they even say that at the, when you're being sent home, it's like, this is when recovery starts. We've stabilized you, but at home you recover. And
Yeah.
that took a long time.
You brought up several really important things that I think are important to highlight when we talk about postpartum psychosis. One, not having any history of mental health disorders. You anyone can experience postpartum psychosis. And you can have all the support in the world and still experience postpartum psychosis. Also being open about the fact that you relapsed is something that is brave and is also it's important to talk about that because just because you relapse does not mean you can't get better. Doesn't mean that you can't get better and that you can't recover because you can. And then another thing that I wanted to highlight as well is the difference between your two like psychotic episodes, where the first one was very much delusional and hyperactive. And the second one, it's so common for people to report having these almost like religious type thinking, even if you're not a religious person. And I'm not sure what your background is, but like it's super common in postpartum psychosis to start thinking about the devil and start thinking like a lot of people see their infants as a demon or as an adult or not a baby, just not a baby at all. So like these are markers to be aware of in the postpartum period that would alert you to you may need to be seeking help for postpartum psychosis. And again, not brushing over anything. Like you said, it took you like a full year before you started to say like, okay, I am recovered. I am at a place where I feel like me again. And I know something that's really important that you want to talk about is your decision to have another child after everything that you experienced, going from never having any experience with mental health disorders at all to having to be hospitalized twice. So I'm really curious about when that discussion came up with you and your partner and how you felt about having another child.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it was actually fairly soon. So after that second admission, I did spend basically the summer in the Netherlands because we'd figure out I just needed like company and people around me. And mm, he was working. So even though it was very hard, we decided I would go to the Netherlands with my baby, and which was extremely hard for him because he was away from us uh, after a very traumatic start to parenthood. But I spent the summer with my mom and dad mostly at my parental house, and I spent it also with very low key seeing friends, and that's when I found a little bit of myself again. Even though I was in a very low mood space for the whole of summer, I think all the high mood at the beginning of psychosis was kind of like offset with. I was never really diagnosed with depression, but I was definitely on the depressed side. I was just like very slow and no energy and not in a great space. But then after that summer, I went home, and as if we didn't have to deal with enough, my father-in-law passed away,
Mm.
which was in South Africa. So we weren't able to make it on time, but we did decide to travel there for the service. So we spent about a month here in South Africa, and it was spring here, and that was the moment I started to really like feel like a little bit of my normal self. I wasn't fully recovered, but I started to notice little things, like I was laughing about jokes again, and I could look around and appreciate little things like, I don't know, a flower or a beautiful color, or like I could feel joy. And I was starting to slowly process a little bit of this, like, oh my gosh, what on earth happened to me? But it did happen. And, these things happen. It's also when I started to read a little bit more about the topic, trying to understand, like, what is postpartum psychosis and why did this happen to me? And I started to unravel everything and process it a little bit. And it was at a lunch at a wine farm that we had a chat, and I was like, I don't know what happened, but I feel like I'm kind of turning a corner. And Anton, my partner, was also like, yeah. And then we had a tiny chat. It wasn't really anything formal, but in that conversation, we both expressed that despite everything, we would be keen to have another child. Not like we were straight away going to go for it, but I think both of us said, like, okay, it was horrible, but it feels like we're on the other end of things. And if we would do this again, like, I would be okay to take that risk, and I'm keen to have another child. We were having lovely family time, also the three of us, which we had not actually had up until the moment our son was 9 months, because I was in hospital twice. And then I spent 2 months away in the Netherlands while he was in England. So it was our first little cute family moment. And I think both of us were like, we love this. And if this was the price that we had to pay in order to get here, it was a big price, but we're happy. That was the gist of that conversation. And then we went back and we started having your normal life, settling in as parents, which is another journey of finding yourself. And I really want to stress this, like, for mothers who go through maternal mental health issues, like, every new mom has to reinvent herself. Like, who am I as a parent? But doing that while you're also recovering from a mental health issue is a total different ballgame, because you kind of have to find your old self back, but you also have to reinvent your new self at the same time. And it's just like, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
And I think that is like the slow process that started when we were away from home, and then we came home and we just started to do the normal things. Like, we enrolled him to a nursery. I started very low key doing some work again. I started doing little things like exercising again, like really things that felt like me. And then, yeah, well, this is typical for me and my partner. Something big happened because he got a job offer in Sri Lanka. And I think especially my father was looking at me like, I think you guys have had enough last year. And we were like, yeah, but this is a great opportunity. And I kind of wanted to get away from the setting. I wanted a fresh start. I wanted to be away from England. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So we made a big international move to Sri Lanka. And only once we landed on the other side, I felt, and it took me a bit of time to land there. So by then my son was 2 years. We really started looking into having a second child. And again, blessed after 1 week of trying.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think I removed my coil and I was pregnant within 6 days after that, which was hilarious. But yeah, pregnancy too happened, and it was a very conscious decision. To wrap up your question, it was a very conscious decision. Both him and both I were like, we want to do this again, which is a big decision, because you have a big risk in the case of postpartum psychosis. Is basically 50-50. So, you're kind of playing Russian roulette with your own mental health.
Yeah.
And I understand that not everyone wants that. Sometimes it's the mother, sometimes it's the father, sometimes it's both. But we were both keen to have another child. And I felt like, okay, I felt confident that if I would build my own village and have my own preventative strategy, that we could do this with me staying healthy. So that was a whole different journey, one that I look at back at with so much joy and pride, because I did stay healthy. Little bit of a
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it I think what I'm, like, gleaning from what you're describing too is you both were talking about preparing. You were talking, like you said, building your village, um, but it also I get this sense that, like, while you hoped that it wouldn't happen again, if it did happen again, you knew what to do this time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Happy to talk a bit through it, but I literally had a document, and I later stripped it down to a template, which I sometimes share with people when they ask for it. But I literally went down planning my mental health prevention strategy. And then I had literally a plan A and a plan B for postpartum. And plan A was like, I stay well. And plan B is, what if not? I really went on it from different angles. So we consulted the psychiatrist who looked after me from the second admission to the mother and baby unit in England, and my whole, because they keep seeing you until you're really discharged, when you're really healthy. In my case, when you're postpartum. We contacted her again. She came on board, even though we were living in Sri Lanka, so she voluntarily contributed, but she thought along, and she advised me about options for preventative medication. Then I sourced a psychiatrist in Sri Lanka, which was not easy, but there are great people there too. And I eventually found someone who had not specialized in perinatal mental health, but someone who had quite a bit of experience in it. And he was very forward thinking, even able and willing to connect with the psychiatrist the UK. And then I also started looking at other things. So I had I did a bit of counseling during my pregnancy. So I had a psychologist on board. We hired a doula who was there for me. She was also a doula who is a prenatal yoga teacher. So I did yoga with her, but I also prepared for birth. And she was very on board with doing, instead of just doulaing, which is her normal thing, she did doula plus postpartum care.
Mm.
And we took it to the next level. She did night care. So she would arrive postpartum the first 2 weeks at our home early in the morning, or actually still in the night. And then for a few hours between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., she would have my second born baby. And I would like breastfeed. So I did even decide to fully go breastfeeding, but she would have him and feed him between those hours, so that I knew, like, okay, I might not get the sleep that I want and need up until 3 a.m., but between 3 and 6 is definitely a window of guaranteed sleep. And we did that for 2 weeks. I was kind of like crafting who I wanted nearby, who not, who I wanted to kind of have in my immediate proximity. So my mom and dad came over for Christmas holiday. Again, I was due on the 1st of January. So
Oh
I
my
tried to
god.
do- yeah, this one was also late. So my second born was the 9th of January. But yeah, at the time I gave birth, my mom, my dad, my brother and his wife were all around. So I felt like I had my crew, even though I live overseas. And it was just like a very carefully crafted bubble with healthcare providers and also social support. I had a OB/GYN who knew my whole background, who was very receptive of my kind of birthing wishes and desires. And the whole experience, pregnancy, birth itself was like a dream. I would give birth like that tomorrow, honestly. It was easy, cruisy, quick. No, I'm not gonna say pain free, but it was medication free. I hypnobirthed it. It was all like the way you would want it to go, and it was such an empowering experience. And then on top of it, I mentally stayed well afterwards, which makes the all around experience so fulfilling and almost like healing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I hesitate to use the word, like, redemption because, like, of course, what you went through was very traumatic and very, very, very difficult beyond what most of us can understand, but, like, still valid. It's still how your first child was brought into the world, and but I am always thankful to hear from parents when they do decide to have another one. I'm so thankful when they get the experience that they wanted the first time around.
yeah,
Just yeah, it's almost like you said, like that full circle moment. Like,
it
"Oh,
is.
this is what I thought. This is what I wanted all along." And it doesn't I wanna stress too, and you, I'm sure, can support this, like, it doesn't change how you feel about either of your children. It just impacts how you feel about the experiences of them coming into the world.
Absolutely. And I mean, everyone who has more than one child, you know that you're feeling for like every child is different. So, and
Yep.
I will never say I love one more than the other, but I love them in a different way. I'll maybe try and explain, like my firstborn, when I was extremely sick, sometimes when I have a nice moment with him or like a little cuddle or I look him in the eyes, like I feel like I'm so connected with him because I literally went through hell with him.
Mhm.
And because I was in a mother and baby unit, I had him with me. And thankfully, I never, even though at a stage I thought he was a devil's child, that was just because luckily, I didn't see hallucinated devil. I was just telling my, 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 my partner, I was saying like he's a devil's child because of him, I'm here. And that's kind of like in part true. But I always loved him and I cared. And this is the thing, even the healthcare providers at the mother and baby units complimented this. I never rejected him. I always wanted to look after him, have him close by. I even kept combi breastfeeding him. So I went through hell and back with him. And I feel like I've got an extremely good connection with him because of that, because he was my only constant in this whole
Mhm.
process. Then my other son, I can sometimes look him into the eyes and like he's the definition of a little island baby. I think he's got some kind of tropical Buddhist island vibes. But like I always look at him and I think like you dude, like you're such a dude and you really made me have this joyful, blissful kind of carefree experience and I'm thankful to him for that. So I kind of have these very opposite experiences, but both I went through with and because of my children. And I
Mhm.
love them for that. Yeah. But
Yeah.
very, I would not encourage every person to go for another baby because that's a very personal decision. And I totally understand that you might not want to do that. But I definitely wish everyone to have like a second healing experience and it will empower you and it will also help you maybe your story. Like I totally own my story now. I actually feel good about the first bad experience as well, which is weird, but that's
I
maybe
don't think
because
it's weird. I don't think it's weird. It's something that you survived, and you should be proud of that. You should own that. I love that. I love that so much that you say that you own it. I there's this whole movement over here at least where we talk about owning your stigma, and there is such a stigma around postpartum psychosis, and to go through hell and back and to be standing here today, yeah, own it. You defeated that with your support system, which sort of brings me to your advocacy work. So, you are not only working in the public health system, but, like, this is kind of transmuted into being a postpartum psychosis advocate. How do you think your combined experiences contribute to how you show up as an advocate for others?
good question. I think I never really um I really I never really felt the stigma. So own your stigma. I love this sentence. I think I owned my stigma from an early stage. Like I didn't feel worried or scared about sharing my experience from even when I was still quite unwell and even to people that I didn't know. So I was openly talking about it even while I was still unwell. And once I recovered, and once it seemed like I was not diagnosed with an existing, like I up until this stage, you'll never know, but I never had a relapse outside of my postpartum period. And it's most likely the case that I don't have a diagnosis, like, for instance, bipolar disorder. So I feel like I'm in this kind of safe space where I was a mental health patient, but currently I'm not. And I kind of feel like I maybe owe it to those people that are more in this stigma space to speak up, because I come of a little bit of a point of privilege. I can talk about the past rather than today. And I feel like telling my story is important for other women to feel less alone, but more so to raise awareness. And yeah, I happen to be in a position that I do reflect, or from my educational background, that I learned to reflect on healthcare systems and on social systems around healthcare. And I feel like I'm in this position that I can tell my own story, but I can combine it with the bigger picture. Like, what are the statistics behind maternal mental health issues? How common is it? Because people always think it's not common, but postpartum
It's
psychosis is
very common.
1 to 2 in 1,000, or people like to say 1 in 500. That's common if you think about how many women are pregnant and how many babies are there. And I feel like, also having moved countries, I can kind of reflect, okay, I had a baby in the UK. I know from a lot of friends what it's like in the Netherlands. I'm now here in South Africa. I've had my second born in Sri Lanka. I feel like I'm in this position that I can reflect on it from different angles, including lived experience. And I want to be able to combine a bit of the professional talk with a little bit of the talk that is happening more in the peer support space, and bringing those two together. And if I'm really being honest, I would like to do more of it, because everything I do now is more from a voluntary perspective. And outside of it, I still have my other work, which is paid work. And in an ideal world, I could be doing more of the professional talk and the awareness raising and advocacy, because there's so much improvement to be made in basically any country. Yeah.
I think if anyone can do it, you can do it. And I feel that about almost everyone that I speak to on Quiet Connection, because you being willing to share your story on a public platform is, I always say, vulnerability is the biggest strength. And you are advocating by sharing your story. Um, just because you have lived experience and you also have somewhat of a professional experience of the healthcare system, what are some of the most important things you want new parents to know in terms of identifying and maybe seeking treatment for postpartum psychosis in particular?
Well, I think generally, I think I want mental health to be much more integrated in prenatal care. I think de- it will obviously depend in which country you are, but in almost every country, you will go through the potential physical complications of pregnancy and childbirth. They'll tell you about signs of high blood pressure, or those things. And I just would like to see that maternal mental health is taken equally serious, like super factual, like, these are the kind of diseases, these are the symptoms, be aware it can happen to anyone. So I feel like there must just be very transparent, clear communication already from the early stage. And I know this is not great. And for instance, I did this hypnobirth course. It wasn't really included. And I understand that, because you're talking to expecting parents and you want them to be excited and you don't want to scare them. But if you don't want to, like, you can't misinform people for that reason either. So generally, I would really like to see that changed. And then secondly, and this is really critical, not just the parents need to know the symptoms. I feel that there's a big gap in actually healthcare professionals not knowing and understanding symptoms of postpartum psychosis. And listening to the episode that you hinted to me of Nancy, like it's shocking to hear that a person like her, she ended up on ENR and no one knew what was going on. Like she was sent home, like the signs were not picked up, yet she was there in an emergency room. That is awful. That is the system failing her at so many levels, and that I would like to see differently. Like every healthcare professional should be able to pick up these systems. And that is aside from whether there should be specialized psychiatric units. Of course, I would like to see mother and baby units everywhere, accessible with the right capacity, not too far from your home. But that is more like, I feel like that is a further win in some spaces. One that is critical, yes, but let's at least start with the fact that your normal existing healthcare system understands this concern. Because not everyone is lucky like me. Not everyone has a partner who picks it up. Not everyone happens to have a panic attack while the midwife is there. And also I was lucky it was a senior midwife who knew what was happening. I might have had a junior midwife or someone who was not informed, and I would have not been picked up. So yeah, that's my main message to healthcare professionals, that anyone who deals with pregnant people or people early postpartum needs to understand the symptoms of postpartum psychosis and other maternal mental health diseases, and take them very seriously, because people die, mothers die, and children die.
Yes. And I will even take it a step beyond that. Like, I think healthcare providers, yes, because they're the people that you're interfacing with the most, but even mental health care providers, at least in the US, again, I can't speak to other countries, but in their education, PMADs aren't even covered. And if they are, it's like a subsection of a subsection, and it's like you mention it in a class one day and then you never hear about it again. So I think, so more understanding, more knowledge, more compassion from healthcare providers and mental health care providers is so critical. Thank you so much to Willemijn for sharing her story with us today. Postpartum psychosis can feel isolating, but conversations like these remind us that no one is alone in this. If you or someone you love is struggling, please reach out. Check the show notes to find resources like the Maternal Mental Health Hotline or the 988 Crisis and Suicide Lifeline. And always remember, recovery is possible. To connect with Willemijn and learn more about her advocacy, check the show notes. And if you'd like to share your own story or keep up with new episodes and resources, be sure to follow us on social media at Quiet Connection Podcast or visit quietconnectionpodcast.com. Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, when another story is told, remember, you are not alone. I see you. Motherhood's messiest moments, we're airing them out.
Odd Moms on Call is the podcast where a no BS mom squad tackles parenting, politics, and everything in between.
It's like venting to your besties, but with mics.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Buzzsprout and grab a seat at the table.